The night rain poured against my window as I clutched the letter that changed everything. His handwriting was still warm in my hands, a promise etched in ink, a shield I thought would never break. But between the lines hid a truth. One he had sold to her. You're watching the Untold Love, where real hearts find their stories. If Emily's journey touches you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I remember the first morning I arrived in the little coastal town that would later hold so many of my memories. The air smelled of salt and quiet beginnings, and the sea stretched endlessly before me, its surface silver under the early sun. I had come there to start over, to leave behind the noise of a life where I always felt too small, too invisible. For weeks, I lived tucked away in a small attic apartment above a florist's shop, surrounded by soft petals and the hum of life happening below. I spent my afternoons wandering narrow streets lined with weathered cottages, letting the wind brush against my skin, whispering that maybe I still had a place in the world. It was on one of those aimless walks that I stepped into the old bookshop by the harbor. Its windows were dusty, but inside smelled of ink and possibility. I remember trailing my fingers along the spines of forgotten stories when a voice behind me said, "Careful, those books bite if you don't treat them gently." I turned, and there was Daniel. He stood with a quiet confidence, sunlight catching in his brown hair. His smile wasn't perfect, and that made it even warmer. He looked at me as if I wasn't just another stranger wandering through. We spoke about poetry, about how certain words could hold entire worlds. I told him how reading had been my refuge, a place where my heart could breathe. He listened, not with impatience, but with an attentiveness I wasn't used to. When I mentioned that I was new in town, his eyes softened. "Then you'll need someone to show you where the sea keeps its secrets," he said with a playful tilt of his head. I laughed, surprised at how easily it escaped me, like I had been waiting to exhale for years. Something about Daniel felt steady, like a lighthouse standing against restless waves. Before I left, he handed me a book, an old collection of poems, and said, "Take this. And remember, you never have to hide with me." Those words settled somewhere deep inside me. For the first time in a long while, I felt that maybe, just maybe, someone could see me, not the pieces I tried to rearrange, but the whole of who I was. The days after meeting Daniel felt like stepping into a world painted with softer colors. Every morning carried a quiet promise, as though the air itself knew something beautiful was unfolding. He had this way of making the simplest moments feel significant, like the time we walked along the pier, sharing a paper cup of coffee while gulls circled lazily above us. His laughter blended with the breeze, steady and warm, and I found myself memorizing the sound. Our friendship grew in quiet, unhurried layers. He would leave small notes at my door, tiny quotes from poets, folded into neat squares. Sometimes we met at the bookshop, sometimes on the beach where the sand was cool beneath our feet. Daniel always listened, really listened, as if every word mattered. It was one late afternoon, sitting on the smooth rocks near the lighthouse, when I felt a shift inside me. The sun was melting into the horizon, casting gold across his face. I wanted to tell him about the shadow I carried, the secret I'd spent years guarding. My chest tightened, but his calm gaze anchored me. So I spoke, haltingly at first, then in a flood of words I hadn't realized I'd kept buried so deep. I told him about the ache of my past, the mistakes, the pain that still sometimes stole my breath. I confessed how often I felt like a patchwork of cracks, unsure if anyone could love what was left. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch or try to fix me. He simply took my trembling hands in his palms warm against the chill settling in the air. "You're safe," he whispered, steady and sure. "With me, you'll never have to hide." Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the rare, fragile relief of being seen. In that moment, Daniel felt like a shelter I hadn't dared hope for, a quiet harbor after years of drifting. As the evening deepened, we stayed there, watching the sky dissolve into indigo. And for the first time in so long, I allowed myself to lean into someone's arms, trusting that maybe they wouldn't let me fall. At first, everything with Daniel felt effortless, like breathing. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, a shift crept in, as quiet as fog rolling in from the sea. I noticed it one morning when we met for coffee at the harbor cafe. His smile was there, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze lingered on his phone, a faint crease forming between his brows. I brushed it off, convincing myself he was just tired or distracted by work. Yet, over the next few weeks, that distance grew like a thin line across glass, barely visible, but impossible to ignore once you'd seen it. He started stepping outside during our conversations, answering calls in a hushed tone. When he returned, his explanations were vague, his warmth dulled at the edges. I told myself I was imagining things, that trust meant giving space. Still, unease coiled quietly inside me. One evening, we attended a small gathering at a neighbor's home. The living room glowed with candlelight, laughter bubbling from every corner. I caught a glimpse of Daniel across the room, leaning close to a woman I hadn't met before, Clara. They were speaking softly, their expressions serious, almost intimate. When Clara's eyes flicked toward me, there was something unreadable in her gaze, something that made my heartbeat stumble. Later that night, I asked Daniel about her. He smiled too quickly, brushing it off. Just someone from the community, he said, changing the subject with a story about a storm rolling in from the coast. I laughed at his attempt to lighten the mood, but the unease stayed, an unwelcome guest lodged behind my ribs. As the days passed, Clara's name surfaced here and there, in passing conversations, in whispers I caught at the bookshop. Every mention left me with a quiet sting, though I couldn't explain why. Daniel, once so present, seemed to drift further, his mind wandering somewhere I couldn't follow. I wanted to ask again, to push for answers, but a part of me hesitated, afraid of what I might find. Instead, I clung to the hope that this was only a fleeting shadow, not the beginning of a storm that could tear through the fragile peace we had built together. The night it all came undone was heavy with the scent of rain. Clouds pressed low over the town, and the sea churned restlessly, as if echoing the storm rising inside me. I hadn't planned to follow the voices I heard outside the cafe, but something in their cadence pulled me closer. Through the soft drizzle, I saw Clara standing under the awning, her words carried on the damp wind. At first, I couldn't quite make sense of what she was saying, until fragments of my own story tumbled from her lips. My breath caught. She spoke of details I had entrusted to no one but Daniel, the nights I couldn't sleep, the scars on my heart, the secret I had guarded for years. The world around me blurred. The warm glow from the cafe windows, the steady rhythm of rain, everything faded except her voice. Each word was a blade, slicing through the fragile safety I had built with Daniel. My chest tightened as I stepped back, pressing myself against the cool brick wall, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. I didn't wait for the conversation to end. I couldn't. I walked away, my feet moving on their own, carrying me through slick cobblestone streets until I reached the quiet of my apartment. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the rain. Daniel arrived not long after, knocking softly as if nothing had happened. When I opened the door, his face lit up with the same familiar warmth, but I could no longer see it without hearing Clara's voice. Why? The word escaped before I could stop it, sharp and raw. Why would you tell her? For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us. Then his shoulders slumped, the mask slipping. Emily. I didn't mean for it to be like that, he said, voice low. Clara's a counselor. I thought maybe she could help you, I didn't want to hurt you. But intentions didn't erase the sting. His explanation only deepened the hollow inside me. I had trusted him with the most fragile pieces of my life, and he had handed them to someone else. Standing there, with the rain still clinging to my coat, I felt the quiet shatter of something I once believed was unbreakable. That night, after Daniel's confession, I couldn't stay in the apartment. The walls felt too close, pressing in with the weight of everything I'd heard. I walked toward the shore, the sky bruised with fading clouds, the moon climbing above the restless sea. Each step crunched softly against the damp sand, grounding me as my thoughts scattered like driftwood in the tide. I sat near the old lighthouse, hugging my knees, staring out at the water where moonlight stretched in trembling silver lines. I wanted to hate Daniel for what he'd done, but all I could feel was a tangled betrayal woven through the threads of care I still held for him. Minutes blurred into hours before I heard his footsteps behind me. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, hands buried in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. When he finally sat beside me, the distance between us felt wider than the sea. "Emily," he began, voice quiet but edged with regret, "I didn't tell Clara to hurt you. I thought she could help. I didn't know how to carry what you shared without failing you." I kept my eyes on the horizon, unsure whether to let his words reach me. "It wasn't yours to give," I said softly. "My story, my pain, they were mine." He nodded, staring at the sand. "You're right. I should have asked, should have trusted you to choose. I was wrong." His voice trembled, and for a moment I saw the man who once felt like a safe harbor. The wind tangled my hair as I searched his face, wondering if forgiveness could ever grow in soil so newly scorched. A part of me wanted to hold on, to believe in the kindness I'd once found in him. Another part knew trust, once fractured, rarely returns whole. We sat in silence, the waves whispering secrets neither of us could name. I realized then that answers wouldn't come from him alone, they had to come from within me, from deciding how much of my heart I was willing to risk again. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, I felt the first quiet pull toward strength, even as sorrow lingered like mist along the shore. In the days that followed, I found myself reaching for a pen more often than my phone. My journal became a quiet refuge, its blank pages waiting patiently as I poured out every wound, every memory, every flicker of hope. Writing gave shape to the storm inside me, helping me see that pain, though heavy, didn't have to define me. Daniel tried to reach out a few times, his messages gentle, unsure. I read them but didn't reply right away. I needed space, a room wide enough to hear my own heartbeat again. For too long, I built my strength around the promise of someone else's protection. Now I had to build it inside myself. One morning, I walked along the shoreline just as dawn stretched soft light across the sea. The tide rolled in steady and calm, as if reminding me that even after tempests, the water finds its rhythm again. I felt something shift, a quiet certainty that I didn't need to stay bound to hurt, even if forgiveness was still finding its way through me. When Daniel asked to meet one last time, I agreed. We met where it had all begun, by the bookshop, the air carrying the scent of salt and old paper. He looked tired, humbled, yet hopeful. "I never meant to lose your trust," he said, voice low. "If I could undo it, I would." I nodded, holding his gaze, seeing both the man who betrayed me and the one who once held my hands as if they were made of glass. "I believe you," I said softly. "But some things, once broken, don't fit the same way again." We stood there for a moment, the silence gentle rather than sharp. I thanked him for the laughter, for the moments that had once been a safe place. Then I turned toward the path leading away from the harbor, my steps steady. As I walked, sunlight spilled over the rooftops, painting everything in gold. I felt the quiet bloom of strength inside me, not loud or defiant, but sure and calm. I was no longer just the girl who needed shelter. I was the woman who had learned how to stand on her own. That evening, as the last streaks of sunlight melted into the horizon, I sat by my window with the sea stretching out before me. The town had settled into its familiar hush, lamps glowing softly in doorways, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and blooming jasmine. My journal lay open on the table, its pages filled with pieces of a journey I never imagined I'd take. I traced my fingers over the words I'd written, over the fragments of heartache and the quiet victories. There had been nights when I thought betrayal would leave me hollow forever, but here I was, still breathing. Still finding beauty in the smallest things, the way the moonlight kissed the waves. The laughter of children in the distance, the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Daniel's face sometimes flickered across my thoughts, the way he looked when he first handed me that book, how his eyes softened when I spoke my truth. I didn't erase those memories. I let them rest where they belonged, as chapters that shaped me rather than cages that bound me. I had learned something precious: strength isn't a roar, it's often a quiet choice made again and again. To stand, to forgive, to let go without bitterness. Trust may have broken, but my spirit had grown roots far deeper than I knew. Outside, the tide rolled in, calm and certain. I closed my journal, tying its ribbon gently, sealing the story of a love that taught me more about myself than I could have learned any other way. I rose and opened the window, letting the cool night air wrap around me. The sky above shimmered with stars, endless and full of promise. A soft smile curved on my lips as I whispered to the darkness, some promises fade, but life keeps offering new beginnings. And in that quiet, I felt an unshakable peace, not because everything had turned out as I once wished, but because I had found my way through the storm and back to myself. Thank you for walking with me through this story on the Untold Love. If Emily's journey touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Stay close, our next tale will begin with a single letter that changes everything.